The fire service is made up of men and women that are willing to do things that other people either can't or aren't willing to do. And I think that's what makes it so special.
What's up, my brothers and sisters? Welcome to the Fireground Fitness Podcast, where we talk about all things pertaining to life on and off the fireground. The views and the opinions expressed are those of your host and our guest. Today we sit down with Noah Katz. He's a fire captain in a major metropolitan city over here in Arizona. And we sit down and talk about his career as a professional hockey player, his pathway into the fire service. We hit hot button topics such as search and safety culture, and then we talked about leadership in the firehouse and on the fireground and how you put that all together. We talk about those things and so much more. Hope you enjoy. So Noah, thanks, man, for coming in and sitting down with me. I've known you, I think, your whole career, and followed you as you kind of came up the ranks. And what I really, not to put too much butter on it, but what I love about you is your work ethic and how you show up for your crew and how you show up to this job as a pro. So what I would love to talk to you about today, a little bit about your journey into the fire service. Of course, we got to talk about hockey a little bit, although I haven't slang a puck in a long time, but I would love to hear about how you knit that into your life and maintain that, because I think when we talk about fireground fitness, you talk about the capacity on this job, and that plays into it a big deal. And then, of course, I want to talk about the training the training company you put together and things that you're doing to further the knowledge, skills, and abilities of your brethren in the fire service. And so let's talk about who is Noah Katz.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about hockey because you're a recovering Canadian. So, but yeah, I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, so on the East Coast. And when I was a kid growing up, kind of had a routine with my mom. It was like drop my sister off at school and we'd go get breakfast, and it had to kill some time before we picked my sister up. So it was like, when I was a kid, we would go to all these fire stations and just kind of look at the trucks and walk around a little bit. And so, like, I'm just, as a little kid, was always kind of enamored by the fire service. Like, I always thought it was a really cool thing. And for years, I was like, oh, I'm going to be a firefighter when I grow up. And, as my childhood kind of progressed, and I got, like you said, really into hockey, I started playing at a young age, and very fortunate, played at a high level as a kid.
Yeah, you were a serious hockey player.
Yeah, yep, very very serious. It was everything to me when I was a kid, and left home when I was 15 to go to high school, about 9 or 10 hours away from home, so I could play hockey, and played college hockey, and very fortunate, 5 years professionally, the last 2 years in Germany. So yeah, I just kind of followed my dreams. And I had a coach when I was a kid who told me, he's like, hey, if you want to play at the next level, you have to be different than other people. You have to be willing to do things that other people aren't willing to do. And I really took that to heart. I decided, like, hey man, like, that difference has to be in my work ethic. It has to be in my fitness level. It has to be in smaller skill sets, because not everybody is going to be a 50 goal scorer, like, star player. But if there's something that I'm really good at, and I can find a niche in those things, those little things that make a difference, then I think that will carry my career, and it really did. So when I stopped playing hockey, it was kind of like, well, what am I going to do now? Because I don't know. I never thought about something other than that.
There was no room. No. There was no bandwidth for anything else. It was hockey morning, noon, and night.
It was. And really, the last year that I was playing in Germany, I played for a team that we were, I don't want to say bankrupt, but pretty close. You're like wondering if your paycheck's coming or not.
Yeah. I'm
living in this, little tiny apartment above a restaurant. So, like, my apartment is filled with smoke all day, all night from these people smoking in the restaurant and stuff. And, like, but, I'm sitting in the dressing room there in Germany and wonder if I'm going to get a paycheck. I got hurt that season. It just wasn't having fun. It was. And at that point, I was kind of like, all right, so, like, is there something after hockey for me? Right. And so I really was sitting in the dressing room one day, and I'm sitting across from a guy who's like probably mid-30s at the time. And he's married. He's got 3 kids. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, man, I can't be that guy. Like this guy's got nothing. Like if this team doesn't pay his check, like this guy can't do anything. Can't provide for his family. He's got no other skill sets. Like this guy's never had another job. I was like, that just can't be me.
Yeah.
And so, I was kind of at that point. I was like, hey, I'm gonna pack up and.
So educate me a little bit about the trajectory of a hockey player when it comes to like the pros. So you get into this. So when I think about playing in Germany, like clearly you were not in the Premier Leagues, right? So what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, so I guess getting into the professional level of hockey, it's kind of goes two ways. Like either you get drafted or you can sign contracts as essentially a free agent. And in hockey, it's kind of different than some of the other sports because you get drafted when you're 18 years old. So, in football and basketball and these things, it's like they've had a whole college career to develop and mature. Whereas in hockey, it's like they're making projections off of you really when you're like 15, 16 years old.
Wow.
And so when you get to 18, they draft you. And after that, like there is no draft opportunity. So guys sign as free agents.
Okay.
So for where I was at that age, I didn't get drafted, but I did play collegiately. And so after college, I was kind of like, man, like I know I want to play. How do I do that? And I happened to be working. I worked 5 summers at a hockey camp in Minnesota, and the guy who was the owner of that camp at the time was a scout for Pittsburgh Penguins, which just happened to be my favorite team growing up. It's where my dad grew up, and he was like, "Hey man, like we'll try to help you out, and we'll get you a tryout." And so that kind of started the path, and those first couple years were really rough because it's very competitive, very cutthroat, and I think, like most people think, it's like the higher you go, it should be based off of skill level and merit, and but it's actually not. It's there's a lot of politics that play into that stuff too.
Yeah.
And so like, the first team that I signed a contract with was in Alabama, Huntsville, Alabama. So I'm down there, and like it's like 5, 8, 10 games into the season, and I'm leading the team in scoring, and like I thought everything
doing great.
I thought I was doing good.
Yeah.
Like I was like trying to get a promotion out of there,
Yeah.
And I get called in the coach's office, and he's like, "Hey man," he's like, "You're like one of our highest skilled players, but you just don't fit in here, so we're gonna release you." And I'm like, "Well, what does that mean?" He's like, "Yeah, you're just not fitting in, so like you're done.
You're fired."
Yeah, you're fired.
Yeah.
So
damn. Did you ever get any clarity on what not fitting in meant?
I think looking back on it, yeah. I mean, like I was just so driven. I wasn't out partying with those guys. I wasn't spending the late nights at the bar kind of thing. Like I was at the gym. I was at the rink. I was in my apartment studying, and going to bed early and trying to eat right and trying to do the things because I thought those were the things that made a professional, which they do.
Right.
But
in certain contexts, right? I think it depends on the culture of the organization.
Right.
And that's exactly what you're pointing towards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, in the minor leagues, it's kind of a funny business because like that coach had been a player just a couple years before. So he was coaching players that he had played with.
Right.
So there was a lot of like, players are out all night drinking, but the coach is out all night drinking too. So like,
right.
Well,
building relationships.
Right. So, I mean, looking back on that, like maybe there is a way to integrate yourself into some of that stuff without, compromising your own values, but, hey man, I certainly think everything happens for a reason. So it was kind of just like, okay, well now what? So, get back on the phone and call around. Oh, you'll give me a chance? Hey, I'll be there. And I just got my truck and drove the next place. And it was like, that first year was rough. I think I played for 5 teams the first year. And so it's just like you're picking up and starting over everywhere you go. But it's like, hey man, like when you're just dead set on having a dream and trying to get there, like just is what it is.
Yeah.
And there was no compromise for me. It was like, hey man, like I'm gonna just keep doing it until I don't want to play anymore. And So fast forward, my third year in the minor leagues, I was playing in Bloomington, Illinois, and I was sitting in the dressing room next to a guy who had played 16, 17 years professionally. He's a draft pick, played in Europe for a majority of his career, and he was just like, hey, man, you ever think about going to play overseas? And I was like, well, yeah, I'd like to, but like I don't know if I can do that. Like I don't know how to do it. And he's like, I think you should, man. He's like, let me put you in touch with somebody over there. So he put me in touch with a German agent, and I went through the channels with him. And so in Germany, or most European leagues, they're only allowed so many, they call them import players. But so at the time, I believe it was like 6 non-Germans per team. So, American, Canadian.
So you fly over there for a tryout?
Yeah, so he got me a tryout. It's kind of funny because it was like such kind of like I knew it was coming at some point, but it's like you don't know when. And all of a sudden, this guy calls me and he's like, "Hey, I need you on a plane tomorrow." And you're like, "Okay." It's like
that's how it works.
Yeah, that's how it works. So, never been to Europe before, so it was like total culture shock.
Right.
Got off a plane in Munich and got picked up at the airport there, and it's raining, it's cold, it's like driving on the Autobahn. This dude is driving like 120 miles an hour. I'm like white knuckle. I'm like, I'm about to die in Germany. And
I came here to play hockey, man. I gotta live.
It was just a wild ride.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So
how did you like living in Germany?
I loved it.
Yeah,
I loved it.
Did you travel around at all, or?
Yeah, so in the minors in the U.S., you play like 5 or 6 games a week, and you're like on the bus all the time, like tons of travel. Over there, you played only twice a week. You played on Friday nights and Sunday afternoons. Damn. So like you had a day off in between, so your body recovers, which is nice. But they also like would give you like some time off. They'd be like, "Oh, it's fall break. You can have a week off," and you're like, "Oh, okay." So like we just and everybody has a car there. Like part of your contract is to have a car and apartment and stuff. So. So we get in the car, drive to Italy, drive to Amsterdam, drive to France. So like, yeah, we travel quite a bit. And
how are the fans in Germany?
Awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, I think hockey fans are the best around anywhere, but it was different. It's like my mom calls them the booster ladies because in the U.S., like, my parents have been coming to these games since I was a kid, and it's like, but when I was playing junior hockey or college or like even in the minors, she's always like, "Oh, those booster ladies, like, because they got your jerseys on and they want your autograph." And but it was the same there. I mean, the fans were great. The fans definitely, it's more like soccer over there, I think, where they stand up the whole time and like they have these big drums and they're beating on these drums and stuff. But
that's cool.
Yeah, it was cool. It was cool. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed it there. Really enjoyed it.
What a unique, what a cool experience, man, to be able to take this sport that you love and go play in a whole other country. Like, what a cool deal.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, part of being in Germany was about the experience.
Yeah.
And like, I really tried hard to learn the language, to integrate myself into the culture there. And I think it paid dividends for me personally, but also as a team player, because those German players see you and they see you trying to integrate, and they really enjoyed that. And when I first got there, the first team I played on, they like had this like divide in the dressing room. It was like, hey, Germans on this side and non-Germans on this side.
Imports over here.
Yeah. And like, what was funny about that is that like eventually like I could speak pretty well, and I could understand more. I could speak for sure. So it's like one night, it's like these German guys are talking, and I'm like, hey man, like I know what you're saying, Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. But it's cool. It's like, I mean, my last year there was 2010.
Yeah.
And even just a couple of days ago, like a German guy that I lived with my first year there, he lives in Austria now, and he sent me a message on WhatsApp the other day. So we're just going back and forth and
that's cool.
Shooting pictures of our families off to each other and stuff. And so it's cool, man.
That's great.
It's a very unique opportunity for sure.
Well, is there anything that you look at from that experience and that you reflect on as a pivot point or a high learning point from that time?
I mean, certainly, like, I think a lot of my fire service career has pivoted off of my hockey career.
Yeah. What do you mean by that?
Well, for one, I think just the professionalism.
Mm.
I think being a professional athlete, I think you're mission driven, right? You're very focused on the task. You understand that, like, your nutrition, your fitness, your ability to study and understand the game. You practice way more than you play mentality transitions to the fire service. We certainly practice more than we play in the fire service. We talk about the physical fitness aspect of the fire service, and that's certainly what drew me to it to some degree. But like I said, I think in order to be successful at any level in sports, be it high school, collegiate, professional, you have to be willing to do things that other people aren't willing to do. And I think that's the fire service. The fire service is made up of men and women that are willing to do things that other people either can't or aren't willing to do. And I think that's what makes it so special. And so I really I believe in that, and I think that's really kind of formulated who I am as a firefighter too, and certainly drove me to get on the job to begin with. But certainly throughout my career, I feel like as the years go by, I think some people as they get on the job, like that, they kind of lose that passion for it, right? As their career goes,
right?
They get burned out, or they have other stuff going on in their life, that kind of thing. I think for me, it's kind of gone the other way. Like I really, really, really wanted to be a firefighter and a good firefighter. And the longer I'm on the job, like that drive to do those things and to serve people and to help people in their worst time only increases.
Yeah. So, well, let me take you back just a minute. So you were coming up to the end of your career, realizing you wanted to do something different. And what caused you to think back and go, fire service?
Well, it's kind of funny because, when I was living in Germany, I was living in this apartment, and like we had a TV, but like there was no, like, we didn't have cable or anything, So my dad sent me a bunch of DVDs, and that was back in the earlier days when we had DVD players and stuff. So he sent me this like all the seasons of the show The Wire. You seen it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I grew up in Baltimore, so like, and so like he sends me all these DVDs of The Wire. So I'm watching the show, and so like we're like binge watching the show, and I'm like, man, it's pretty cool. These dudes are detectives, doing these drug busts and stuff. And I was like, that's a pretty cool job. Like maybe I want to do that. And so I really wasn't sure. It was kind of funny because I'm like, I don't know. I know I'm not going to play anymore.
Right. So
at first I was like, well, maybe I'll try to be a detective. Like, that's a pretty cool job, So I started kind of looking around a little bit, and take it back a step. Like, my parents had, they grew up in Baltimore area and lived there their whole lives. And then when I was in Germany, they decided to move to Arizona.
Oh, I was gonna. My next question was, how'd you end up out here?
Yeah. So they moved here. Well, when I was playing overseas. Copy. And for me, like I always said, I was like, I own a suitcase. Like I don't own anything. I had a truck, and I sold it before I went to Germany. So like I really just owned a suitcase and a hockey bag. And I'd spent a lot of time in Minnesota, working hockey schools there, training there. Had a whole friend network there, so it was kind of like, hey man, like, and like I said, I mean, I left home when I was 15, so it was like I didn't really have an affiliation to go back to Maryland at all. So it was kind of like, well, where do I go? Well, I go to Minnesota because I have some friends there, or I guess I could go to Arizona because my parents are there.
Because the hockey scene here is huge.
Yeah. Well, it was just like such a funny thing. So I'm like, all right, I think I'm gonna move to Arizona, check it out. So simultaneous to that, a guy I played college hockey with calls me, and he's like, hey man, didn't your parents just move to Arizona? I'm like, yeah. He's like, oh dude, like we're opening a sports training business in Scottsdale, Arizona, and they're looking for a director of hockey. He's like, any chance you're interested? And I was like, yes.
What? Whoa, that's amazing.
Yeah. So it was like this really weird deal. Like it just kind of like fell in my lap, and so I got on a plane from Germany, flew to Phoenix, interviewed I think the next day for this director's position at a sports training facility, and got the job, and it's kind of off to the races from there. But it's like a couple months into it, I'm kind of like, man, like I'm just not loving this like I thought, And I have a kinesiology degree from when I was in college and stuff. So like, it's kind of like a a pitfall for, oh yeah, if I stop playing hockey, maybe I like this stuff. I like fitness. I'm really into fitness and like that training aspect, but yeah, it just wasn't fulfilling.
Yeah. What was it about it that was kind of missing a niche for you?
I mean, honestly, I think when you're talking about coaching, especially when you're working with young athletes, like I think you have a lack of control. And it's like you could tell somebody they need to do this X, Y, and Z to be successful, but unless they want to do it, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
And that was frustrating for me.
Yeah.
Because I'm such a hey man, this is what we need to do to be successful. Like let's do it. And like I never had any issues as a kid or in my career doing that stuff. It was just like I'll do whatever I got to do to be successful. I don't care what it takes.
Right.
And now you're working with kids who are there because mom and dad think they should be there, not because they want to be there. And I was like, this isn't not my thing.
Yeah. There's an important leadership lesson in that, right? Like not everyone has the same level of aspiration or inspiration or enthusiasm that you may have. And so so the question becomes, how do you get other people to get on board?
Yeah.
It's tough. It's not always easy. You got to figure out what their why is and what their reasons for existing are, right? And existing in that circumstance, in that context, and then try to figure that out and get them along. It's tough.
It is tough, and that is something that I've certainly dealt with my career as a firefighter too. Even as a young firefighter, very driven, and I'm very fortunate because I worked at busy companies that had a lot of motivated people, but there's still always people around that are like, "Why are you doing that? What are you doing? I'm not going to do that." So. Yeah, it's definitely been a good lesson for me as a firefighter as well. But I just wasn't fulfilled there. So it was kind of like, well, now what? And it's funny because a guy that actually worked for me at that sports place, he was testing for the fire department. And so he's like, yeah, I'm testing for the fire department. Such a cool job. So he starts telling me about it, and it just like clicked in my head. I was like, oh yeah.
Did you just flash back to when your mom was taking the stations?
Right.
Like, wait a minute.
Wait a second. So it was like I was like, all right, like let's see what this is about, And so it just kind of, really like kind of got lucky there too, because I was giving lessons to Frank Bayless, his son. At the time, Jack was coming to that sports training place, and he was just a little kid.
Yeah.
And so one of the moms told me, oh yeah, this guy he's a Phoenix firefighter. And I was like, huh. So I asked him about it, and Frank's like, well, I'm captain at Station 18 in Phoenix. He's like, why don't you come by the station? And I've never been on a ride along, so I'm like, okay. So it's like, so he sets me up, and I show up at Station 18 at 6:30 in the morning one day, and I'm like watching the shift change happen, and I'm just like, dude, what do I have to do? I'll do anything. Like, let's make this happen. But I think it just kind of like clicked in my head, like, hey man, this is the camaraderie and that locker room mentality that like I've been missing.
Yeah.
And like, because I missed that. It was a hard transition to go from being around other people all the time, people all working together for a common goal on a sports team, to being like, hey, I'm trying to sell gym memberships basically. And I'm like, dude, what am I doing? Like, I'm not benefiting anybody by doing this. This is not something that I really care about. And so when I went to the station, you saw that, you know how busy it is at shift change.
Yeah.
Guys coming on, guys coming off, having the interactions with the other shifts. The guys are checking the truck off. The guys are talking about their plan for the day. And that's obviously a lot of activity at that station, multiple trucks there and stuff. So,
yeah. For those unacquainted with Phoenix, Station 18's a lot of folks transition in and out of there every day, and the high call volume.
Yeah. I mean, it's always been.
Yeah, lights are always on.
Super high call volume there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was kind of like just kind of clicked for me. I was like, dude, like this is where it's at. And then of course, it's like that's obviously 18s is an interesting area to work in. It's kind of a diverse area of the city. I think there is a few nice parts of that due, and then there's some areas that are really not nice at all, and some very dangerous areas. So it's like, as you're like riding on the fire truck and seeing all this stuff, it's like, I mean, I had no idea. I didn't even know where I was in the city of Phoenix at that time, you know? So, but what I took from that is like, hey, it doesn't matter. These guys don't care who they're running a call on. They're delivering the same level of service every single time. And that was something that I found very attractive. And I've always tried to put that into my game, is like, hey man, like 3 in the afternoon, 3 in the morning, like doesn't matter. They don't know.
Yeah.
They expect the same level of service every single time. And to me, that was kind of like sports, right? It's like, hey man, like doesn't matter if your game's on a Tuesday afternoon or Friday night lights. It's like, hey man, you have to perform every single time. And the people that are going to watch you expect to see the highest level. And it's the same in the fire department. They expect the highest level of service no matter when they call you or what they call you for.
Yeah. So we hear people talk about compassion fatigue and, complacency has a tendency to creep in over time. And you mentioned earlier about, how guys get, late in their careers and they start to get a little bit frustrated and demoralized, right? And so how do you maintain your enthusiasm?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is challenging at times. It doesn't matter who you are. There is a time that is challenging for sure. But I think for me, what I try to remind myself of every day that I go to work is why I wanted to be there in the first place. And so, it's like we always talk about, it's like, hey man, if somebody truly understands what the mission of the fire service is, they truly understand what the mission of the organization they work for is, and they have conviction as to why they are there. If you can just remind yourself of that every day, I think that certainly helps with that. The other piece of that too is for me is like, I feel like I remind myself often of what it took to get there. It was challenging. I came into the fire service at a time where Phoenix Fire Department had been on that 3 or 3.5 year hiring freeze. Mm. So I was on the tail end of that. So, which actually benefited me because during that freeze, I had time to get my EMT, to do the Fire 1 and 2, because nobody was hiring. So it was right. Like, what else are you going to do but keep adding to your resume?
Right.
But because of that and the struggles with the frustrations of, man, I just want this job so bad, but like I just can't get it yet. I think that's important for me too, that I remind myself, hey man, like you really struggled.
You said you wanted this.
Yeah. And quite honestly, so when I was testing, obviously I really, really wanted to work in Phoenix. Like that was my thing. I was like, hey man, like if I'm doing this, I want to be at the biggest, I want to be at the busiest, I want to be at the premier department in the area. But I mean, if anybody would have hired me, I would have taken it in a second, but I was volunteering for in Tempe Fire Department. I had started a volunteer program at the time, and it was only me and maybe 1 or 2 other people, but like I would go there every Friday and essentially do deliveries for them, drive to the stations, deliver turnouts, and pick up mail, and essentially what a red shirt would be in City of Phoenix.
Right. Kind of a go for a runner.
Yeah. And really just volunteer hours,
Yeah.
So I did that for a while when I was trying to get hired, but Greg Reese, who was the chief Tempe at the time. So when I got hired by Phoenix, I called him and I told him that I gotten hired, and I was like, hey, I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity that you gave me with Tempe, but I'll let you know I got hired with Phoenix Fire Department. And he said to me, he said no, he's like, let me tell you something. He's like, don't ever forget. He's like, you didn't ask for this job. You begged for it. He's like, don't ever forget that. And I use that line with every single one of my probationary firefighters. I talk about when I teach in other places as I travel and stuff. And I just, man, like just it resonates because it's like, it's so true. It's like, it doesn't matter if it's 3 a.m. and you're on your regular customer for the 3rd time that shift. It's like, hey man, like people are begging for this, for this job. Like, and I did.
Yeah. So. Yeah, we often, first of all, let me just say, I love that. And Chief Reese is one of my favorite people, man. I love that guy. He has some significant level of integrity, right? When he talks about, the business of being a firefighter, it's important to listen to what he has to say.
Yeah, absolutely.
And because he's wise in many ways. And you brought up why you're here, right? This whole idea of your purpose in doing whatever it is you're engaged in, right? And I think that we have to remember when it gets hard, what brought you here in the first place. And and I love that idea. Remember, you begged for this. Yeah. You asked for this. Yeah. So don't freaking complain about how hard it is. You knew. And so I guess we talk about, this is a total tangent, but I think it's important. Recruitment and retention is down right now. And there's folks leaving the job at a number that is surprisingly high right now, leaving early in the career. And I'm wondering if we're not doing a good enough job of explaining what the job really is to people, right? If you really want to be here, you need to come in eyes wide open. This is what this job is. It can be a lot of EMS. It can be fire and dangerous and dirty and covered in carcinogens. All that kind of crap comes with it. It can be sleep deprivation. It can be seeing traumatic events and dealing and managing trauma, which all can have negative consequences. So are you really interested in doing that job? And if so, are you really interested in doing it for 25 or more years? Better check yourself and have a real honest conversation with yourself before you walk in these doors. Because you're going to deal with all that stuff. I couldn't agree more. And something that I'm probably a little outspoken about is because I think that a lot of fire departments right now are in such a struggle to not only hire people but to retain people, that they're basically bending over backwards to try to get people in the door. Mm-hmm. And I don't agree with that. What does that look like to you when you say that? I think that there's a lowering of standards to some degree as far as test scores to get in, be it maybe some of the standards to stay on the job, or to get through an academy. I just think that at some point, like, we have to understand, like, hey man, like, this is a very dangerous job. There is risk. There's risk for us. Mm-hmm. There is certainly risk for the people that we serve. Especially when you start talking about fireground operations and how those things work. I mean, obviously, there is a lot of risk on the fireground for us as firefighters, but there's also a lot of risk for the customer, right? Like, we're encapsulated in turnouts and SCBA bottles, and like, yes, we can get cancer, yes, we can get burned, and I certainly would never wish any of those things on anyone. However, Mrs. Smith that's laying in the hallway in her pajamas doesn't have any of that stuff, and she needs someone to go in there and find her, and to bring her to safety as fast as possible. Yeah. So, but I think that because some of those things are maybe don't happen as often as we maybe want them to, or are trained to think that they do, I think that complacency level sets in a little bit, and so now people start to wander about, you don't really need to be super highly trained in that because, it's only 10% of the job. Right. Hey, I've been on the job 15 years and I've never been on a victim inside of a structure fire, so it's not going to happen. Right. Like that kind of complacency. And so that sets into, just how the fire department operates, I think, because it's a disease, really. And so when we allow that to set in, and then that goes into lowering standards and lowering the way that we think about things, I think it's dangerous, number one, to us, right? It's dangerous for us to think that way, but also I think that creeps into like the quality of people that want to do this job and then want to stay on the job. So it's a very deep. It's interesting. So you're peeling, and let's talk about it a little bit, because I think this is a hot button topic that you're touching on. You're peeling the corner back. So let's talk about it a little bit. There's a movement in the American Fire Service to ensure that we are being as aggressive and as focused as possible on rescue. Because there's a feeling and I'm feeling whether it's real or not, or whether it's just a thought process, that we are being more risk averse and we're putting safety first.
Yeah.
And I think it's tricky because Mrs. Smith absolutely needs us to come and rescue her. 100%, 100%, no question. Rescuing victims is our number one objective, right? Always on the fire ground, every time.
Yes.
And the hard part of that is the risk to our firefighters has changed. The risk, and don't get me wrong here, I'm not saying that we shouldn't take this on. What I'm saying is we have to be smart about it, right? So the risk to our firefighters changed. Fires have gotten hotter, faster, right? The operational context has changed.
Yeah.
So fuel loads are higher, the heat release rate is higher, the equipment that we wear has certain levels of protection and not in certain categories when it comes to exposure to carcinogens, et cetera. So the impact of firefighters has evolved and changed. So it's causing us to have this wrestle with how do we do this job and still maintain the health and wellness of our firefighters and still go and rescue Mrs. Smith.
Yeah.
Right. And so years ago, what the change that happened was we went from day boots into turnouts. Right. And so the evolution of turnouts is going on. Right. And I think so. What I think is happening is we're wrestling with this change. It's causing kind of a disruption and a disturbance among all the membership who are like, no, we got to rescue victims. We're like, yes, we got to rescue victims. However, right, we also got to take care of ourselves. And there has to be balance in that, right?
100%. I mean, and you're right. There is a lot of tension right now in the fire service about which one of those camps is right. And quite honestly, in my opinion, I'm like, they're both right. I mean, that's the thing. It's like they're both right.
Yeah. Right.
We know that the number one objective of the fire service is to rescue people from fires. Like, right. and that's if you look back into when Ben Franklin and they're starting the Philadelphia Fire Union, it's like, man, like what was that for? It was to save people from fires. Right. The mission has never changed. Almost every single fire department is the sentiment of save lives, save property.
Yeah.
And so we all say that.
Yeah.
But how do we do that but also maintain safety to a degree that we can swallow? Because we know that there is inherent risk, inherent danger that no matter what, we can't get rid of all of that. And I think that's also something that people struggle with, because I think there are certain people that are like, oh no, we need to eliminate all risk. And you're like, but you just can't, man. Like, I'm sorry, you can't.
It's exactly. So I think we have to sort of step back from the emotion of the issue. Hey man, I am all about rescuing people. And so, but when we run around saying babies will die, we're not taking into consideration the totality of the situation. So if you get burned up in a fire, and now we've lost another person. We lost a victim potentially, but we also lost you. Now you can't respond on another fire potentially, right? Or your family loses you. So like there's loss in this on every level. And then people will say, no, but he signed up for it. He knew what the hell he was getting himself into. He signed up for this. Okay. But we as a fire service have a responsibility to take care of our firefighters. So when we step back from it, we go, whoa, okay, we're being pressed into these corners going, the pendulum is swinging one way or the other. But the reality is we need to go, okay, victims need to be saved. Fires have gotten hotter and more dangerous. Okay, well, what are we going to do about that?
Yeah.
We can't not go get people, right? We still got to go get people. That's the mandate. So how do we do it the most effective way possible?
Yeah. So I love your point, because this is the conversation that I know that I have with my crew almost daily, and my, that's why we started the training business. It's why we have taught some of the classes that we teach, and it's like, I've been fortunate to travel quite a bit, taking classes, teaching classes. I actually taught a class in Mexico. In Cabo last February. We're supposed to go again this February. But
cool. In Cabo?
Yeah, in
That
Cabo.
Sounds like a write-off for vacation.
It was a tough time. But here you are.
Let me know if you need any other adjunct instructors.
Yeah.
I'll carry your pocky bag.
It was great. It was great. But the point of that is, like, you're in Cabo. I don't speak Spanish. Yeah. I'm working through an interpreter. I'm teaching search to Mexican firefighters.
Yeah.
And these firefighters who have a quarter of the gear that you have, right? They got holes in their crotches. They got their, big toes sticking out of their boots, right? These guys are responding to the same fires, if not worse than some of the fires that we're responding to. They're responding on what they deem to be, let me show you our brand new ladder truck they're so proud of. We turn the corner and it's like a 1973 Mack truck.
Yeah.
And they're like, this is awesome. And I'm like, it is awesome, but not for the same reasons that you think it's awesome, So it's like, but here's the thing is like those firefighters are mission driven.
Yeah.
Those firefighters are doing the same job that we're doing. And those firefighters have an understanding of how they can accomplish those tasks and do it as safely and as effectively as they possibly can.
Yeah.
And so what I take from all of that is I think that part of what the fire service needs to do is needs to continue to push education and educate firefighters and have an understanding of how we do these things that we need to be doing, but how do we do them most effectively? And I think, and that a lot of that is big change for firefighters, right? Firefighting has always been a blue collar profession. And sometimes I think we take that to the extreme as like, hey man, we're going to kick this door in and we're going to, put water here and then we're going to smash this window out and, oh yeah, we did it. And it's like, okay, but why do we do those things? And how do we do those things that best benefit the outcome of Mrs. Smith, but also the best benefit of us? And, obviously, things like the UL FSRI studies have been a huge thing. We've learned a lot from that. Yeah. But that's changed how I certainly think as a firefighter and as a fire captain, because I'm training my people to think differently and to do things that maybe 8-10 years ago that we didn't think was such a good idea.
Yeah. Well, so let's touch on one of those items, vertical ventilation. This is an important tool in the toolbox. And what's happening is the people with, and I will say this, and I don't mean this to be disparaging, but people in their ignorance say, well, I guess we can't vent anymore, ever. No. That is not what the evidence is demonstrating. The evidence is saying you have to do it at the right time, in the right place, based on conditions, driven by your conditions. So if that's true, what that tells me is that we need to be really fucking good at our job, sizing up and figuring out what the right place is, making sure that our actions are coordinated. Well, how do you do that? You train, you study, you train. When people cast out, like we go back to the whole search culture and this idea that we got to go get victims. Yes, but how do you do it? You don't just sit in the station and go, well, I guess we can't get there. No, figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. And the ventilation thing I think is a great topic, because not only do we still need vertical ventilation, but we need to be having horizontal ventilation and passive ventilation from the interior. And those are concepts that we maybe didn't think about years ago. And I know for me, my own experience, right? Like I was a probationary firefighter on ladder 9. I had some very senior guys on that ladder with me. John Webb being one of them, who in my mind to this day would be like my number one firefighter that I've ever worked with. Like that guy was, at the time, I think he had 26 years as a firefighter, and that guy was he's bad to the bone. I mean, but
agreed.
He said that he told me, he's like, yeah, we're not smashing windows out. Don't do that. Okay. And I never asked why. I just said, okay. Right? I mean, so fast forward, I'm going through my career thinking like, oh, we never break windows from the interior. Well, what we now know from these studies and also from practical experience, and some of my own experiences in going to Georgia Smoke Diver Program or to some of these other things I've been to, these concepts of, hey man, you absolutely should take windows from the interior, but you only do those things if water's on the fire or it's an isolated compartment. So what am I teaching my firefighters? Well, when we're searching, what are they doing? They're entering into a room. they're shutting the door behind them, which isolates the compartment.
Mhm.
They're taking the window. So what happens in that, we know from the studies what happens in there, which is important to note, but behind a closed door with an open window with passive ventilation, so we're getting good air in, bad air out just passively, right? You're reducing temperatures in that room by up to 900 degrees, and you're reducing the parts per million of the toxic gases from over 10,000 down to below 100. And so you're like, okay, so let's think about the totality of those things. We know that people die in fires from two things, from thermal insult or toxic insult. Most of the people that die in fires are dying from toxic.
Yeah.
They're not dying from thermal. So
Yeah.
so heat or gas, right? Essentially
Right.
those two things. So they're breathing in toxic gas. And so how do you reduce toxic gases so that they aren't breathing those anymore? And then how do you reduce the heat so that we can work in those environments and it's a safer environment for us to work in? And I'm like,
Water.
So water on fire, shutting a door, taking a window, cutting a hole in the roof when necessary, right? Or when appropriate.
Right.
So now in conjunction, all those things are happening. Now we're putting not only those victims in the best place for a chance at survival, but we're also putting ourselves in a better working environment to do those things and a safer environment to work in. And so those things don't just happen, they happen through education.
Yes.
And so one thing I always say is like, hey man, the best firefighter on the fire ground is the most educated, the most trained, also in very high physical condition, and the most able to make independent decisions that benefit the outcome
Right.
of the incident.
So let me ask you a question. I think I know where your answer is going to be, but I want to see if you're going to answer it the way.
All right.
Why is physical fitness so important on the fire ground?
Well, for one, you can't perform the tasks necessary if you're not physically fit. And so we know that the mind and having to make risk management decisions, independent decisions with your mind, those things need to happen on the fire ground. And you cannot make those decisions if you are gasping for air.
Yeah.
So it's like, it comes back to this whole thing of like, hey man, the lower my heart rate is, the slower my breathing is. It's the physiological factors that affect your body that allow you to perform at the highest level. And so, take that into consideration when not even just search, but it's like one thing that I talk about a lot when we talk about with Mayday stuff, right? So so no doubt you find a victim on the fire ground, you're amped up.
Right.
Holy shit, I just found Mrs. Smith. I've been working my whole career for this. This is the Super Bowl of the fire service, right? Is finding a victim and making decisions that directly impact their outcome.
Right.
However, we should be expecting those things to happen, right?
Yeah. When
a firefighter goes down and there's a mayday, we typically don't expect that to happen, right? Something bad has happened that has caused that outcome, right? So when that happens to us, and now it's somebody that you care about, it's somebody that somebody you worked with, they're wearing the same color, t-shirt that you're wearing, like that's a big deal. So whether you are highly trained or not, the physiological factors that are about to happen to you, you have no control over, right? So raised blood pressure, raised heart rate, increased respirations, loss of dexterity, loss of mind control, all these things are going to happen to you. So if you're not physically fit, you have no control over that. But the more physically fit that I am, I can calm myself down, I can make the right decision, and then I can put that decision into action that's going to have a positive outcome.
Yes. All that. That's exactly what I thought you were going to say. And so I think about this in terms of, let's just go, you're on the rink, you're on the ice, hockey moves fucking fast.
Yeah.
Right. And your field of vision, like you watch hockey players move and they're pushing that puck around, shooting it back and forth, passing it around. That takes an amazing amount of vision. Well, when you're hypoxic, your vision diminishes. So the greater level of physiological capacity you have, your ability to function improves, which you just articulated incredibly well. So I'm just beating a drum here. But I think that parlays over when we talk about your ability to function on the fire ground. And I don't want to repeat what you just said because you said it perfectly, but that's exactly right. Your capacity matters. And the space between your ears, that 6 inches or so, is such an important part of being a professional firefighter.
Absolutely.
And we talked about, you mentioned, those elements of flow path and ventilation, etc. Well, understanding why you're doing what you're doing on the fire ground is incredibly important to a successful outcome. And if you want to have the best outcome possible on any incident, you have to be incredibly capable and have a high level of knowledge, skills, and ability. And then the other part of this, which we didn't talk about, but I'll throw in, is stress inoculation.
Yeah.
So you learn those skill sets, and then you go out and you train and you ratchet up the intensity. And we should expect to find victims. And what that means to me is that we are trained at a level so that when I come across a victim, I know it's not a new thing for me. I've trained this 100,000 times. And so when I come across a victim, I go into muscle memory mode and I react. I call for assistance, start working the problem, and I extricate the person out. It's not going to get me excited.
No.
And because if I get excited, now I can't think. And if I can't think, I'm going to get myself or somebody else hurt.
Yeah. And what's interesting about that is that, it's I think it kind of goes back to what we're talking about recruitment and retention, right? It's like when people are getting into the fire service, there is, I think, the public's perception of what the fire service is and what it's about. And that is to put fires out and to rescue people from fires, right? Is what I would think that most people would say, right? It's like you walk down the street and you're like, hey, Mrs. Smith, like your house is on fire, you're trapped inside. What do you expect the fire department to do? Like, rescue me, right? I think everybody would have some type of variation of that response, right? Now you get into the fire service, and because victims aren't found on every fire, right? And because fires are becoming fewer and far between, and the experience level of a lot of firefighters is not probably what it was when you were a young fireman and stuff. Like, because of these things compounding, people finding victims, while we should be expecting that, and I certainly preach that. We have a sign in our station: expect fire, expect victims. Yeah. Right. And I love that thing from Andy Fredericks, FDNY. He said, like, hey, like a garbage man doesn't turn the corner and, surprised to see garbage. Right. It's like,
I've never heard that. But I love it.
Yeah, it's awesome. Amazing. Right. Because you're like, well, right. So you get dispatched on a 3-in-1 or, a fire dispatch to a structure fire. Yeah. Why are you surprised to see a working fire with a victim interior? You shouldn't be. Right. So like, that's just what you should expect. Yeah. But to your point, it's like, absolutely. I mean, I think the more educated you are and the more you can expect these things when it happens, then you're like, all right, how do we put these things into action? Yeah. And part of that action, though, is the training that comes with it and having a plan. And I know for me as a young firefighter, one thing that as I would work with different people, it's like you kind of ask some questions. Hey, if this happens today, well, like, what do you think we should do? Or what do you want to do? And the answer most times, like, we'll figure it out when we get there. Oh yeah. Which I just can't stand it, right? But so on the other side of that, on my crew, when somebody comes in, it's like I lay it out for them. Hey man, this is how we operate. Yeah. And without setting expectations, I think without setting expectations, you can't have any expectations. Yeah. So how do you expect something from someone if you don't tell them what they need to do? And so what's interesting about that is because obviously in Phoenix, like it's a very large fire department. It's very, very transient, right? People are coming in and out, overtime, shift trades, backfilling spots, rovers, yeah. Right? So, right. So like, I forgot what the numbers off the top of my head, but they said like the roving population of Phoenix is like the second largest fire department in the state of Arizona. Yeah. Yeah. So because of that, it's like, there was a time when I thought to myself, like, well, if so-and-so's off, then you want to call the chief and have them send somebody who is going to come in and do a good job. Right. And so fast forward a couple years, I'm like, I would never make that phone call anymore. And the reason is because I'm like, send me whoever you want, whoever you deem necessary to be there for the day, because I'm going to train them, I'm going to educate them, and I'm going to set an expectation for them that they probably haven't gotten anywhere else. Yeah. And it's happened over and over and over again. I had a guy come in who a few months ago, he's been in a little bit of trouble in the organization in his personal life. Not necessarily his skill set or his his physical abilities, right? But he certainly has gotten himself into some trouble with his reputation and some of his actions, off-duty behavior type of stuff.
Copy.
And so because of that, he's an outcast. People don't talk to him. He probably goes to work and goes in his dorm room, shuts the door, doesn't come out. Like when he eats chow, he doesn't say a word. This guy walks into the station, and you could just tell, like,
pariah.
Yeah, I mean, he looked like a beaten dog. His tail's between his legs. Like you could tell, like, he was embarrassed to be there. And I walk over to this guy and gave him a hug. And I was like, hey, man. I was like, really happy to see you. Glad you're here today. Hey, man, this is what we're doing today. This is how we run our program, okay? We're going to do our checkoff. We're going to have coffee and eat breakfast. We're going to go train at 9 o'clock. This is what we're going to go train on. We're going to shop. We're going to cook. We're going to eat. We're going to chill a little bit. At 4 o'clock, we do a skills course every single shift. And after the skills course, we do down firefighter packaging. We're going to cook dinner. We're going to play cards or watch a movie. We're going to have a good day. And I was like, hey, man, whatever you need, hey, man, I'm here for you, right? And so we did that, right? And that guy the next day, when he was leaving, came up to me and shook my hand. And he's like, hey, I can't tell you how much I really appreciate that shift. He's like, not only did I learn a lot during training, he's like, and I had never done some of the stuff that you are talking about, and I really, really enjoyed that. He's like, but I felt very comfortable here, and thank you very much.
Nice.
I haven't seen that guy since then, right? And that was a few months ago.
No, that matters though, man. That's, you're touching on a really important topic, which is the culture in our organizations is important, and it takes active management, right? And leadership. We have to be connecting with our people to help them feel bought in to what we're doing. And if you want to push a message, you talk about training and being professional at your job. Well, part of the reason people leave organizations is they feel disconnected. They feel like they're just a cog in the wheel, and they have no real connection or buy-in or affiliation with the organization. And, I've had plenty of guys say, oh, well, that guy's a freaking weirdo, and that's why, it's on him. But no, it's our own responsibility. If he's a weirdo, he's our weirdo.
Oh, absolutely. And I certainly have had an opportunity to work with people who are deemed to be those weird people, right?
Yeah.
And what I find with a lot of those people is that they're not weird people, right? Like they might have some quirks, right? Their personalities might be a little bit different. They're not the norm of whatever the department or the members of the department deem to be like a cool guy, you know? But those people are there for the same reasons as everybody else, right? They want to help people.
Right.
They want to do the right thing. They're drawn to the job, right? So what you see is that a lot of these people just have never been mentored.
Right.
Because people discredited them before there was an opportunity to actually figure out what drives them and how you make those people tick. And so, I've really tried to pride myself on that is when you work with some of these people, hey man, you got to give everybody the benefit of the doubt and kind of figure out what they're about.
Yeah.
What drives them? Why are they there? What's important to them?
Yeah.
And then you feed those things, but you also feed that with the understanding of, hey man, these are the things that I need to get out of you. So how do I make those things happen?
Yeah. And it's, you mentioned this is an individual who's going through some stuff. People's lives are messy. And we tell guys all the time, and I say this all the time, is, you can tell someone, hey, you got to leave your personal crap at the door, but that's just not realistic. Right? It's not a realistic expectation. So we as leaders need to figure out what each individual needs to be successful and help them get it. Let me ask you a question about, so, you talked about your routine and whatnot. And so as a company officer, what is like a non-negotiable for you?
Attitude, right? And so it's kind of funny because, for me, I'm like, hey man, like you just said, it's like I 100% understand that there are things that are happening in people's lives that will affect you at work.
Yeah.
You can't leave it at the door. Like I've been through it myself in my personal life, around the time that I actually got promoted to captain. So I'm like, here I am supposed to be this, newly minted captain doing everything the right way, but I got this mess in my personal life going on at the same time. And it's like, how do you work through those things, right? But what I've kind of learned from that experience is like, hey man, like if I show up to work and I do what we talked about earlier, and I remember that I begged for this job, and I'm able to fuel my passion to be a firefighter. If I'm able to fuel those things, then I will have a much better day, have a much better attitude, and I'm going to deliver much better service. And so for me, it's like, well, how do I fuel that? Well, I fuel that through training, right? Because I think what happens is we get bogged down by the medical stuff a lot of times. Not that it's not important, right? And I certainly, so, you know, last shift we actually had a fairly serious trauma, and like we're working on this guy in the back, and I'm thinking to myself, like, this is like, I don't want to say it's fun, but it's like you get to use the skills that you were trained to use, and
Right.
and because we don't do that every shift, I think people get bought into the other side of that stuff sometimes.
Right.
But I always say, man, hey, if you show up to work, you should do something fire related every single shift.
Yeah.
And if you do something fire related, what that does is it switches people's mind into being like, hey man, that's right. I do like putting my gear on. I do like training. I do like the idea that we're going to go to a fire today, and that I have a possibility to save someone from a fire. If you just can make that switch in somebody's mind, their attitude changes. Their attitude on calls is better. They're more engaged. They want to be around other people. Like it's a weird thing, but for me, I did that. I started doing that to myself, and then all of a sudden I'm like, hey man, like that's something that is really important for other people. And so I've actually kind of taken that a step further now. So you know, as a company officer, we talk about setting expectations, and what I didn't like about setting expectations is that, like, well, is it my expectation or should it be the crew's expectation? Because we're all in this together, right? I wear a different color helmet. I sit in a different seat, and ultimately I'm responsible for the safety of these individuals, and I'm responsible for the outcome of the incident. However, I can't get there if I don't create buy-in from everybody else. And I think you would agree. It's like, hey man, you could be the absolute best company officer, right? You are the most trained. You're the most educated. You treat people right. You're tactically sound. Like, you do all these things, but you can't outperform anybody on that truck.
Right.
You can't. Because no matter what your on-scene report is or how you set your assignments, if, you know, guy in the back seat can't pull a handline off the truck in a certain amount of time, and it's kinked, and now he doesn't know how to flow water appropriately, you're already behind. And now your engineer is having trouble making the hook up to the hydrant because he never trains on it, and he's just like, oh, whatever, man, it's no big deal. And now he's
figured out when I get
there. Right. Now he's pumping now he's over pumping your line, so now your line's got too much pressure, right? So it's like all these things compound. If you don't train your people, right, don't set expectations as a crew, then nobody's going to be able to perform to the level that you need it to happen. So non-negotiables. I recently made a poster for the station, and so everybody signs it and says, hey man, these are the things that we believe in. And Station 15, no good dudes. That's the slogan there, right? So no good dudes. This is our expectation on B shift. These are the things that they're non-negotiable for us, right? And so the first thing is that expect fire, expect victims. Every time there's a dispatch. It's the first thing we all believe in, right? The second thing is that we're going to train every shift to make sure that we have the most positive outcome for the people that we're responding to, and also the most positive outcome for ourselves, right? But then we go into some more measurable objectives, right? And that was important to me to set measurable objectives, because now we can look at that and be like, hey man, are we meeting this or are we not?
Yeah.
Right. Because you could say, hey man, hey Rain, I need you to have a good attitude today. And you're like, yeah, I do have a good attitude. And I'm like, no, but you don't. Right. So like everybody's perspectives are different.
Yes. Yeah.
But if you put metrics on it, there is no negotiation.
Right.
So some of the metrics that we set are the expectation that we're going to be able to mask up with gloves on in 20 seconds or less. That's a skill that we practice every single shift as a crew in the afternoon. So we get the stopwatch out, and now it's a friendly competition, and we've been doing this for, probably about a year.
Yeah.
So you're watching these times go from a minute. Guys are like, I can't do that with gloves on. You're like, yes, you can. So guys are doing it in a minute. They're doing 45. Now we got guys are doing it under 10 seconds.
Nice.
Right? Measurable objective.
That's awesome. I got to give a shout out to my boy Scott Ciccone. he taught me when we worked together at 39. I was the engineer there, and he would always check his bottle with his gloves on,
Yeah.
and he would throw his mask and the whole 9 yards. I was like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "You got to be able to do this, bro. You can't do this. What kind of fireman are you?" And I'm like,
Yeah.
So I wove that into my practice.
Yeah.
What a great skill.
It's awesome.
But I love that you added the, you and did you guys establish those norms, if you will, as a crew?
Yeah.
Okay, this is what our measurements are going to be and what we're going to be about.
So we were talking about a lot of this stuff, right? So
Yeah.
the mask up thing was kind of like an organic deal. Like one day I'm like, hey, like let's start doing this. When we do skills course in the afternoon, we work out as a crew in the afternoon in gear every shift. And so I'm like, hey, let's start adding this to the routine.
Yeah.
Hey, let's mask up with gloves on. Boom, go right into the workout, right?
Right.
So we started doing that for a while. Well, then I was like, hey, man, let's start recording the times and see like what happens.
What's the norm?
Right. Let's see what it is. And then
Yeah.
it's like, well, let's put a metric on it. And then so we're sitting at the table one day and I was like, hey, I have an idea of like what I think some of our expectations should be. I'm not going to tell you what I think mine are, but I want to talk about it as a crew. And I'm going to lead you down the path of, hey, what do you think a time for this skill is?
Yeah.
Or what do you think about this? And you guys tell me what times you think are appropriate or manageable. And then let's all agree on these skills, right? So that was one of them, was the mask up thing.
Copy.
One of them is line off the truck, hand line off the truck to the door, charged, ready to make entry in 60 seconds or less. Right? So it's like, I mean, if you look at like the regional academy, right, they got to pull a 150-foot line in a minute and 15 seconds, right? So we're like, hey, man, I was like, take 15 seconds off of that.
Right.
You guys aren't in the academy. But now you're dealing with obstacles. You're not doing a straightaway pull, right? You're doing whatever. But, hey, man, is a minute manageable? These guys are like, I think we do less than that. 30 seconds. I'm like, all right. Let's. So, but good, man. Like, have higher standards. So that's one of them, right? So,
All right.
all the way down to the very last one is primary all clear on a structure fire. That's a measurable objective because we can go back to the timestamps from on-scene time to time of all clear on the radio of how long that takes. And so if you look at the gold standard of all clear in the fire service, you know that at that 6-minute mark is right around where things start to go the opposite way, right?
Yeah.
So 6 minutes is, if you find someone the first 6 minutes, you have a 68% chance of survival for that person. So past that marker, you're losing about 30% in the next 2 minutes, right? And so even if you look at like CPR, right? So we talk about CPR. Every minute that CPR is delayed on somebody in cardiac arrest, there's a 10% reduction in survival rate. So you're like, so those minutes are critical to somebody's survival. So if we think about that, what would be the gold standard for a primary all clear? Well, it's got to be under 6 minutes. Now, doesn't mean it happens every fire? No. Right? Because there's things we can't control, right? We can't control the hoarding conditions. We can't control the fire load. We can't control, the 17 locks on the front door that we had to force to get in there, right? There are things that will slow that time down,
Right.
but at least I wanted it to be in somebody's head, like, hey, man, this is an objective for us, and not only just for the all clear for the victim, but we all know that once an all clear is achieved, that changes the risk to firefighters operating interior as well.
Yeah. Well, you know what I love about that as well is that adding a metric to it, now you can identify the obstacles to achieving it, right? So, hey, we got to get this done in under 6 minutes. Well, 17 locks on the door. Okay, well, how do we make our ability to force doors better? We train that task, right? So how do we make sure that once we get inside the structure, we can get it all clear? Well, we work on how we navigate buildings and how we actually search them, right? How do you move through the building as efficiently and effectively as possible? All those types of things. So, where do you hang your flashlight? There's all the little details that you can work on to improve the skill set. Now you can actually do that because you have something to point to. If it's just arbitrary, we got to get it all clear. Well, there's no reason to move fast, no reason to hustle, no reason to improve your efficiencies of your skill sets. So I love that.
And no, I mean, that goes back to, what I said earlier. It's like, hey man, like for me, I've always found a niche in doing little things that make a big difference. And that is just that. The all clear is the finding, a victim or achieving all clear. That is what the objective is on the fire ground, right? Like, but in order to do that most efficiently, most effectively, safely, right, quickly, to do all those things, like you have to have an understanding of how to do the little things that add up to big things that make a big difference, right?
Well, it goes back to that old Navy SEAL adage, right? Slow is smooth, smooth is fast.
Yeah.
Right. Well, if you want to be and that requires efficiency and economy of movement, and that only comes with practice. And then, of course, you go back to what we talked about before. Your physical fitness plays into this. If you're coming back from your plugman's coming up from the plug, and they're gassed from running 400 yards or however far it is. Now they're not highly conditioned. Your fine motor skills go away, and now you're not as effective.
Absolutely, and that's the thing is like, and that's why we train so heavy on, right? Taking the plug, pulling a hand line, forcing a door, masking up with gloves on. All those things are just a ticket to the show. The show is the interior of the structure, right? Like you have to get in there. Now you're going to perform, and then it's like, now you do find somebody,
right?
Now what? If I'm so gassed when I get to them that I can't do anything,
right?
Like you're just
thanks for nothing.
Yeah, you're part of the problem, right? So that's where the physical fitness piece is a huge, huge deal.
Yeah. Hey, let me ask you. So talk to me a little bit about. Let's just pivot just a little bit. Talk to me about what you're doing off duty. This training company that you guys put together.
Yeah.
So clearly, you passionate about training.
Yes.
So what are you doing to help firefighters across the country and whatnot?
Yeah. So the company's called Priority Fire Training. Which, it's me and two other guys from Phoenix, Josh Brooks and CJ Schreifels, who are two of my best friends. And we actually, the three of us, all worked together at the same station for a while, at Station 18. Josh and I were on Engine 918 together. CJ was on Rescue 18. So we have a connection from working together at that time. But we traveled to some conferences together, went to some classes together. And so these guys are very passionate about bringing some of that education back to the Valley. And so we went to a conference a couple years ago, and we're coming home, we're sitting at the airport, and I'm like, hey man, why is nobody bringing this stuff to the Valley? Like the Phoenix Fire Department is known internationally as, a very big deal, especially when it comes to, to some of the incident command structure and some of the stuff that Bruno started, right? So, but it doesn't seem like a lot of stuff comes here and people are very open to accepting anything that's different, right? And so I kind of thought about that. I'm like, you know what, man? Like, hey, when I was growing up playing hockey or even playing professionally, it's like you're still seeking out people to improve your game, right? So whether you're going to a strength and conditioning coach to help you with your fitness, or you're going to a skating coach to help you with your skating, or you're going to, a sports psychologist to help with the mental side of the game, right? So you're still seeking out people to improve your individual skill sets, but at the end of the day, you're still benefiting the outcome of the team.
Yep.
And so It was kind of like, hey man, like, what can we do to benefit the outcome of the big picture of the fire service in Arizona, but developing individual skill sets to get there? And so it kind of comes back to the training stuff. Our big thing with the training was, hey, we need to have people understand why they're doing the things they're doing, teach them about the intricacies of how things work, why they do these things. So, because I think we get time compressed in the fire service, right? Hey, I got a 16-week academy. I need to get somebody from point A to point B. Like, sorry, man, I don't have time to talk to you about how this halogen works, but I'm going to put it in your hands. You need to open this door, right? So then guys are like, oh, cool, man. Like, I don't really understand how to get a mechanical advantage or how wide this adds is and why that's important, right?
Right.
Or what's this mark mean on this halogen? It's an 1 3/4 mark. Well, why do you have it there? Well, I got no idea. Well, it's because it's the same as your doorstop. Right. It's past the jam.
Right.
Oh. Right. So we were like, there's small details to the fire service and to skill development that we can help people with that will benefit the outcome in keeping them safer,
Right.
in giving Mrs. Smith the best chance at a positive outcome, right? So that's kind of how we looked at it. And so starting with the whys, like, hey man, why are we doing these things?
Yeah.
Why are these things important? And then we try to build on those skill sets to develop the skill. And then, as you said earlier, then we start that stress inoculation.
Yeah.
Because I forgot what the guy's name is off the top of my head, but he's like a sports psychologist. But basically, he said, is like, hey man, a skill is not a skill unless you can perform it under pressure.
Right.
And if you look at the fire service, it's like your skills are under pressure 100% of the time.
Right.
When you pull up on that structure fire and that fire's, coming out of 3 windows and somebody's in the front yard yelling that their family member is trapped inside, there is no greater pressure.
Right.
And so it's like, hey man, I can force a door all day with my Halligan in broad daylight and the back of the station, and it's no big deal. But now I got fire showing, I got somebody yelling at me, I got the guy with a charged hand line behind me like, hey, open that door. I need to get in there.
Right.
Somebody trapped in there. It's like, now the guy's spinning the Halligan like a baton in the front yard. You're like, which way does it go? Which way does it go? It's like, okay, man, we have to develop you to the point where it's just automatic for you.
Yeah.
And so that was really the premise of it. The name with priority was, hey man, it was a few things. One, it was, hey man, let's prioritize training. Let's prioritize certain skill sets that we believe in and that we think will make a big difference to the fire service. And then the last piece of that was kind of like, hey man, like, what's the priority of our lives? Like, why are we doing all the things that we're doing? And a lot of that came back to family. And I think for us, we decided, all three of us are value family very highly, and was like, hey man, like, we work very hard to be very good at our jobs, but a lot of that comes back to our family too. Like, the better we are at our jobs, not only are we understanding and giving someone else a chance to enjoy their family, but we're also coming home safe to our own families. And so that was a big thing for us.
Nice. Well, I really appreciate what you guys are doing, and I think it's important. I love the premise that you brought up specifically about the individual skill set and us as individuals developing our skills so that we can be a player on a team, right? Nothing happens in a vacuum. We are functioning as, a crew of 4 typically, or sometimes 3, or hopefully 4.
Yeah, right.
And, we're out there doing this as a team. And if you don't, as a company officer, I thought about this so many different times. I can't see my crew. I just hope that they're doing, we're in a dark, smoky building. I just hope that you're doing what I imagine that you're doing. And that only comes with training and preparation and individual skill development. And man, you said before that the guy who says, we'll figure it out when we get there. Well, when the tones drop, the time to prepare has passed.
Yes.
And, I think about that a lot throughout my career and my life. And like, we're always in preparation mode for what is coming down the pipeline. But when the shit happens, preparations are over. You got to act, and you better have the requisite skills to be functional and be able to contribute to your team. So, man, I love what you're doing. Let me ask you some rapid fire questions and we'll pull it to a close.
All right.
What is your favorite firehouse meal?
I mean, Phoenix corned beef tacos. Not necessarily for the
tinfoil on the table.
Tinfoil tables, yeah. So I mean, I worked at 18 which was funny because that's the first ride along I did in Phoenix was at 18. I ended up being a firefighter there for 4.5 years. So it's kind of full circle for me. But every single Friday for 4.5 years, corned beef tacos on Fridays, nice. Right? And so like it was a tradition for me. Like, and that's why I like it so much. The foil on the tables. It obviously takes a lot of work to make those tacos. So like
a lot of love goes into those things.
Yeah, a lot of love. And so like all day, it's like guys are together. Yeah. And I think the fellowshipping that comes with that meal, what that means, I think is way deeper than what it tastes like. They do taste good. Don't get me wrong. But
right.
Yeah.
All right. Favorite training evolution?
Search. I mean, I'm huge on search. Love it. One thing that we do at the station, we bought a little fog machine on Amazon.
Pepper smoke.
Yeah, it's like, Halloween fog machine, and so we we kind of rearranged the furniture, put some beds down in like the main living area, and so we'll smoke it out and put a bunch of people in there. And so what I love about that is that you're trying to create this some realism to it, right? But what I want more than anything, and I love more than anything, is I love the confidence that builds in people, because it's like, hey man, you're going to go in here, you're going to search this room. You might find one victim, you might find 3 victims, you might find no victims. But when you walk out of that room and you say, hey Skip, it's all clear, you're 100% certain. You need to be 100% certain. And that to me is the ultimate, because now you're building trust in your people.
Yeah.
So when my firefighter, Joe Schmelz, when he comes to me on the fire ground and says, hey, all clear on the west side of the structure, I don't think twice. I'm like, copy that, all clear, got you, thank you.
Nice.
Right? So building that only comes through repetition, and so that drill in particular, I think is my favorite for many reasons, but for that's certainly one of them.
All right. Favorite position on the ice?
I was a center, so for people that don't know, it's technically it's offensive, but it's kind of the jack of all trades, right? The center's jack of all trades, takes the face-offs, he plays down low in the defensive end, but also can play offensively. And so to me, like, that was just something that I really, really enjoyed and adapted to, because again, there's skill sets that come with that position, like taking a face-off in your defensive end when the game is on the line. That takes a very important skill set to have, right? Winning face-offs is a really big deal, because it controls the play. And so that was something that I really focused on a lot. I was like, hey man, like, I'm going to be the best at face-offs that I can be, because not everybody that plays this position is great at face-offs. So if I can master that, then that gives me an opportunity to play at a higher level, because I can do that one thing better than anybody else. So,
nice.
Yeah.
All right, last question. What does it mean to you to be fireground fit?
Great question. Fireground fit to me is the ability to function and perform in your gear for a long duration and still have more in the gas tank. And what I mean by that is, I think the fire service in general is getting pretty good at getting people to train in gear. I think task and gear is becoming more of a mainstream thing. Whereas, like, I think when when I first met you, when you were at 39, and you had your website and stuff, it was like you were doing stuff that was totally extremist. Like, people in the fire service weren't doing that stuff. And Phoenix in general has always, I think, been ahead of the rest of the fire service when it comes to guys working out in gear. At least in my career,
yeah,
it's always been a thing. And in the last few years, it's been more and more of a thing. Well, now you look on social media and it's everywhere, right? Yeah. And which is a great thing for the fire service, right? But it's more than just putting your gear on. It's being able to perform and still be able to think and make decisions. And I think that's really where people miss the boat sometimes, is being able to do both those things. So, to put that in kind of perspective for me, I started doing this thing at the station. So forever, we've always done skills course, in the back, typical skills course, like tire drag, sled push, pike pole prop, whatever, hand over hand tires. Like, so it's like, we've done that forever, but at some point it becomes mindless. Mm-hmm. And then you're like, it's just tasks. It's just a task. So where does the skill development come in? Skills course. And so I kind of thought about that. And so one day I write this thing up on the board, and these guys are like, all right, what crazy idea do you have now? And I'm like, we're going to change the way we do this. This is now not called skills course anymore. This is called task versus skill. And they're like, well, what's that mean? And I'm like, so you're going to do a task, and then you're going to perform a skill, because you need to have the manipulation and the ability to calm your mind down to perform a skill. So it's like, and we change it all the time, right? But essentially it's like, can you push this sled from one end of the parking lot to the other? And then when you get back from that, can you still mask up in 20 seconds or less with your gloves on? That's a skill, right? Yep. Hey, can you drag this tire backwards around the parking lot, and then when you get back, can you manipulate the wire prop when you're blacked out? Because if you can't, then we need to figure out why you're not able to do those things. And if you can, then good, because you can calm yourself down and you can understand how your fitness plays into those things. So it's not just mindless task anymore for us. So I think that's I hope to see more of that in the fire service, because I think all this fitness stuff is awesome. Some of these guys out there that are doing, really pushing the fitness stuff. I know some of those guys pretty personally, and I think it's awesome, right? There's a lot of guys out there that are pushing a lot of gear workouts and stuff, which is tremendous for the fire service. But we need to add in those skill pieces to it. So
I love it. Right on, man. Well, thank you so much for sitting down and rapping with me, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Well, that's all we have for today, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in. Special thanks to our guest, Noah. Appreciate your time, brother. If you're enjoying the Fireground Fitness podcast, get on over to Apple Podcast, rate and review the podcast. That helps other listeners find their way here to join us in this journey. Other than that, the lessons learned here today, talking about search and safety culture and how you and your crew can make yourself more successful, build your knowledge, skills, and abilities, be more effective on the fire ground, be a better help to Mrs. Smith, to your crew, and to the overall professionalism in the fire service. Go on out there and get some.